So in this video, we're going to talk about reflections. Now, we're not looking at reflections of shapes here, we're just looking at reflections of functions. And there are only two mirror lines that we consider at this stage when we talk about reflections as a graph transformation. And that is when you reflect in the y-axis or if you reflect in the x-axis. Okay, so we're only going to look at those two. So reflection in the y-axis and a reflection in the x-axis. Now you may be wondering as to why we only look at those two mirror lines. Well, you can reflect graphs in y equals 1, y equals 2, y equals 3, or x equals 4, x equals 5, x equals 6, etc. You can do that, or in other diagonal lines, but they're more complicated, okay? In some instances, it would take you to working with matrices, for example, which is broaching into further maths for A-level material. Okay, so we're only looking at two here because that's all that's required at this level, but you can explore it further. So the way I want you to think about this is by thinking about a pair of coordinates and considering where they move to. So let's consider and just choose some coordinates. So let's go with this point here, and this point has the coordinates 3, 5. Okay? Now, the first thing we're going to do is we can consider what happens when we reflect that point in the y-axis. So here's the y-axis. If I reflect it in that line, it's going to appear somewhere over here. So it is 3 units away from the mirror line, and so its image will appear 3 units away on the other side. So what are the coordinates of this point? Well, seeing as that's to the left of the y-axis, this is at -3, and it is still above the x-axis, so +5. So we've gone from 3, 5 to -3, 5. Now, what's happened there? Well, the x-coordinate has been replaced with the negative of the original x-coordinate. So the x-coordinate has changed sign. So what happens is that if you start with y equals f of x, then the x-coordinate changes sign. So it gets mapped to y equals f of -x. So from what we've looked at with graph transformations so far, we know that if it's inside the bracket, it affects the x direction. Okay, it affects it horizontally. And this is precisely what you're seeing. It is affecting the graph horizontally because it is moving horizontally across the y-axis. If we consider reflection in the x-axis, then our point here, if it's reflected in the x-axis, is already 5 units away from the mirror line, and so it will appear 5 units away from the mirror line below the x-axis. So this is 3 along, 5 down. So that has the coordinates 3, -5. So if you compare going from 3, 5 to 3, -5, the x's have stayed the same, but the y's have now changed sign. So when we write this down, we say that y equals f of x has been mapped to, well, the y has changed sign now, so you could theoretically write it down like this. Y equals f of x has been mapped to -y equals f of x. But because when we're working with function notation, we quite often multiply both sides by -1 and just remove the minus sign so it appears on the right-hand side, okay, out the front of the f of x. Now, what we've seen before is that if it is outside the function notation, then it affects the graph vertically, okay? And the minus sign being outside means you are moving vertically across the x-axis, which is your mirror line. So, if it is inside the bracket, if the negative is inside the bracket, it is a reflection in the y-axis, okay, because it is moving horizontally. And if it is outside the function, then it is a reflection in the x-axis, so it has multiplied everything through by -1, then it reflects in the x-axis, and so it is moving vertically across the x-axis. Okay? So it does feel the wrong way round because of the way that we have decided to label the x and y-axis. We know from the previous videos that the x-axis is y equals 0 and the y-axis is x is 0. Okay, so that can lead to a little bit of confusion. But if you just consider some coordinates that aren't on the x or y-axis and think about where they would move to if you reflected in the y-axis or the x-axis, we shouldn't go wrong.